Hey everybody. Oh, I'm very excited today because my New York Knicks, there we go, are now the world champs or NBA champs. So I just want to let you know that there's been a fitting conclusion to my um fandom. So anyway, very excited but tired. Um I will be going to the Ticker Tape Parade on on Thursday and but I will be producing videos like I'll normally be doing. So um what I want to do today was to kind of continue the discussion on basically getting the most out of your reporting that you need to get out of, and that of course connects to the megalomania assignment. First things first, I was actually quite pleased with the AI student reaction assignments. Many of them were very much on key with actually like with good depth, good anecdotes, good transitions. Just as long as you kept that structure. I did. Some of you did notice that, like, I again not a fan of big long quotes. I just look up the word stenography, and what you're doing essentially there is just essentially just transcribing what people say, and then can make the story unreadable. Especially when people kind of meander with the way they talk and this sort of thing. What you want to do is you want to be an interpreter. Remember what I said before about listen, internalize, and then write, summarize. You write stories much like you take notes. You summarize what's being said. You paraphrase what people are saying when they give it to you, whether it's a professor or whoever, or a person on the street. So if you did have a quote that was actually like incredibly long, I would actually like show you in your story where you needed to really just kind of paraphrase these stories. And the examples, I did actually provide examples in the um I provided at least one example, I believe, maybe two. One, two. Sorry. In the assignment entry. Actually, let me just go to that right now. Because the rewrite will be due on Friday, okay, which is the same day as the Megalomania assignment. By the way, there it is. Knicks champs, yay! First time for me. First time in 53 years. Can you believe it? And I've been a fan since 1984, so it's 42 really for me. But anyway, let's see here. I'm just trying to get over to where I need to get to. All right. Um, so let's go to. I have a lot of tabs open. I know. This is actually again the professor's view. So let me get to the student view. So this makes more sense. Okay, and again, I like to show by type. Okay, so as you can see, this is the rewrite entry that's due. Remember that there's actually a separate entry for the rewrite. Okay, and I actually did include two samples, and if you look at both of those samples, you'll see they're largely paraphrased. You'll see that you can almost cut off sometimes like half of the words that you might be using in your story. I like to use the word economy again to basically show that what basically what you try need to do is be economical in the writing so a person could be economical in the reading. Okay. Um, so that when they actually like do like say something that's long, and yeah, I really actually sometimes I do things on the fly, so I pardon me for that. But when they actually do things like, let's see, there's two of type size that's big enough. They talk like things like, I really do think AI can sort of spacebar to order be a good thing um because it can help. This is a lot of the pro AI remarks came down on this way. Help provide uh, why my space bar is not working. Structure um and help organize essays before I write them. And That can be the most frustrating part of it. Okay, so what you're trying to look for here is I'm trying to say this in as few words as possible, or at least like in a more most efficient way as possible. So I mean, there's really like words that you really need to say, I really do think, you know. Um, Brown, just say Brown said AI can be good because it can help provide structure and organization for an essay assignment. So you have any words I just cut down there? And then maybe this could be the direct quote that I meant to put a B here. B illustrate because this actually shows some emotion or something. Right? And that's when you actually put things in a quote that kind of highlight it to kind of show humanization, that sort of thing. He said. So let's see. I went from let's see what we got here. Oh, oops, I went too far back. Okay, so that was tools, word count, 35 words. So this comes out right. The 28 words. I cut off 7 words. That's a pretty significant amount. It could be like a whole sentence, you know. And I even included a direct quote. So that those 7 words could make a big difference and make it a lot easier to write. Okay. All right. So yeah. So let's work on that. Let's get that done. The megalomania assignment I've talked about a lot already, but I really want to like show like what purpose it really serves to actually really be the interpreter for the public and not just like in terms of like handling press releases, but in handling information that comes out in general from the sources that you typically use. Now I talked about chapter 19 and basically the role that public relations serves, but what I didn't talk about is essentially is the source of that public information and what it is typically. And that's actually chapter 17. Okay. So I only have just a few chapters for you guys to read left. One of them is chapter 17. And this one actually talks about the different places where that provide the information that you typically go to. And, and I showed you one of those places already, and that's the police department, and trying to basically kind of translate and interpret it so that people can understand and easily read things. But not only that, but get to the truth. And I may have said this already, but forgive me for being redundant, but um, there was a reporter was one of the big reporters that broke the Watergate scandal, which was the scandal that brought down Richard Nixon's administration in the early 70s. And his name was Bob Woodward. He's still alive, and he once said that it's a journalist's job to seek the most obtainable version of the truth. So you shouldn't put too much pressure on yourself and just expect to get exactly what is the real thing. And again, right now I'm reading peace agreement again with Iran. And actually, this does actually look like there's some sort of ceasefire agreement actually that's actually happening. Although I think I said that last time. But but you know, Iran is also like putting out some things saying that's kind of not necessarily contradicting the idea of a ceasefire agreement, but contradicting the what's being agreed to. Anyway, um, so anyway, what you really need to do is, I mean, you can't necessarily be in the room where when people decide things and decide how they're going to police things or how they handle police incidents or that sort of thing, or something that involves right here the local government. But what you have to do is you have to get as close as possible. Sometimes it requires using anonymous sources, which I haven't really talked about much. But there are like we're really going to be dealing with essentially on the record name sources in this class. Okay, there's really no need to use anonymous sources. Um, but there are different ways of actually like um everything should be sourced no matter what. But there are like ways of actually like using information that maybe otherwise be hard to get. Okay. And when I say hard to get, I means that maybe that person doesn't want to have their name being used, or maybe they use the term off the record. Okay. So there's on the record. Okay. On the record is basically on the record, but also that's basically you can use anything. Okay. But that's I'm talking about with a name. When it's on the record, but it's called background, or another one is without attribution. That's another way of saying it. That's your anonymous sourcing. Okay. And sometimes that has to be used because there's no other way of getting that information. And maybe it's that important enough to use. But of course, you have your TMZ kind of outlets, your gossip outlets, your celebrity gossip outlets that will do it. And sometimes they pay the sources to get that information. So yeah. So of course TMZ, whatever they seem to print, always seems to turn out to be right, but whatever. So with attribution means that it's I'm sorry, I meant to say without attribution. Without attribution, that's when you basically have something that says sources said, okay, or a source close to somebody. When you have deep background, that's a whole different thing that we're not really going to get into here. That's when you actually like are putting really highly sensitive information and you don't, if you actually attribute it to somebody, it could actually still expose that person because maybe that's the only person who knows that information, if it makes any sense. Okay. But what we're going to be doing is on the record with attribution. Okay. To keep things simple. And most people actually trust things when they actually have a name attached to it. Okay, we're not doing like high level investigative reporting in here. The other last thing is also off the record, which actually is probably more of useful than without attribution or anonymous sources. Off the record is when you can't use the information you're given to at all. Now, why would that be useful? Well, it's useful because sometimes that's the only way to get information. But what you can do is you can find somebody who will actually you take that information that's been given to you, and then you can find somebody who actually somebody else who can confirm it for you. The Watergate reporters did that. They found out information that was damaging the President Richard Nixon. They could many times, most of the time even, they couldn't get that information on the record right away, so they had to go to somebody else to get it. Sometimes they had to do it anonymously, but sometimes not. So um, when you're dealing with local government, as it says here in a chapter, I mean, basically you're dealing a lot of times with things like, as it's talking here about, like anything from, dealing with like weather damage, that sort of thing. I mean, I remember when Mamdani, the mayor of New York City, was like handing out like, was it money to people to shovel the streets and stuff like that. That's like the one thing that people really care about is like really like handling in your local governments is like handling snow. We had some snow this past summer, or sorry, winter. So yeah, that's an issue. You deal with things like loss of power, stuff like that. Um, but there's often like I'm trying to summarize what's being said here. So, a lot of times when that sort of thing happens, you report what happens as it's happening. But what you want to do is you always want to provide people like some reason for like or some sort of sense of like was this the best way things could have been done? Because one thing that people would care about more than anything is like their tax dollars or how their money's being spent, you know? And there's nothing more devastating to like a new governor or a new mayor when one of the first things you have to deal with is a snowstorm and they have to just deal with the plowing and whatever else goes on. So um if you're not doing that correctly, if you're not like doing things that keep the roads clear, make sure that the um that the that the not just the roads are clear during the wintertime, but also like in the summer, there's capacity on the roads, there's not like construction getting in the way, the things that are dealing with in a normal daily life. If those things are running smoothly, then people tend to be content. if they're not running as smoothly, that's when people start looking at their wallets and their pocketbooks and saying, is that basically, was this my tax money? Is this being spent wisely? So that's where the reporter's job is to find out. You don't just report the event that's happening. You find out like things like, could this been done better? You know? Um, you find out things like, you try to find the who, the what, the where, the why. Okay. Um, it's gonna be interesting when you have this later in the week. I'm gonna go to this ticker tape parade for the New York Knicks, and you know, usually those things run very smoothly or something like that. But sometimes you get like some crazy things that are happening. I mean, obviously last night it was amazing. I'm taping this on Sunday, by the way, but there were amazing like views of like people like on the streets and everything celebrating the whole thing. But one of the things that you've seen happen in these big sports celebrations is people getting hurt, stuff like that. And look, this might show my political stripes a little bit, but I gotta say, I mean, that was amazingly handled. Um, when you can actually have like people give credit to the people in the streets too, if they can actually behave themselves and you know treat things with care and not hurt anybody and that sort of thing, and especially at these sports celebrations where people tend to get drunk and stuff like that. That's a credit to not just the people, but also the people who are doing the organization. There's been some talk about that. Like the mayor was actually kind of in a fight with the Knicks owner about that, mayor of New York, Mondani, and he wanted to have the celebrations near the Madison Square Garden and a couple of games ago, and then the owner of the Knicks, who's a jerk, sorry, banned it. So what he did was, as an alternative, is he went over and had like controlled celebrations over in Central Park and Battery Park and places like that, and he went off without a hitch. So, when something like that, when the things run smoothly and there's like no controversy, that sort of thing. That's why I say like when people say like, why is all bad news news? Well, that's because people want to know why things are effed up, when things are running smoothly and stuff like that, people just want to know that and that's it. That they don't really need to know anymore. It's just a waste of their time. But if something is effed up, they want to know why that happened. Okay. They want to know about crime and accidents, and your police or your sources on that. And again, it typically handed out maybe their own spokesperson or something, somebody who actually, or they hand out press releases. But sometimes you have to get beyond that to find out what really happened. First time many reporters having a police beat, basically is like dealing with crimes and accidents. Okay. Um, sometimes like things aren't always like what they appear in an accident or a crime or something like that. And sometimes you see that happen when, we've seen accidents happen involving like celebrities or famous people or politicians or something like that, where well, then we find out later that there were things that happened that weren't exactly reported the first time around. We've seen things happen that were racially motivated, especially involving the police and that sort of thing. I'm actually going to get into that in a bit. And we don't find out till later, like what was really kind of the motivation behind that. And I have to say, particularly with the police, okay? Um, Sometimes you don't find that out from a press release. You have to do some digging. Sometimes you get what they call the old-fashioned news tips from people, and that's actually something that's usually done anonymously or something like that. And then you have to investigate it and try to find somebody who will go on the record and talk about it or something. Or maybe there's some documentation someplace. Okay. So that requires a little bit of digging. That requires a lot of calling. That requires a lot of emailing, texting, whatever. Just trying to find out the who, the what, the where, the why. Whenever there's like any kind of like report, and you got to again use your reporter radar on an accident or a crime or something like that, and there's something that goes on about it that's a little bit fishy. That's when you really got to dig and go. Really, for any of these crimes or accidents, you really got to find out, especially when somebody gets hurt or killed. You want to find out, not just like report the incident that happened, but find out what could have been done differently. That's the public service aspect of journalism, is you want to find out how this could have not happened, you know. Sometimes that means that I have to say, I hate to say it, but maybe interviewing the family, because the family might have a lot to say about it. The family might know things, especially maybe through their lawyers or whatever, that maybe the others don't know. Maybe there was a drunk driver involved or something like that. Maybe there was a something involving that, and you have to like basically start calling people within the realm of the accident and calling up all the different figures on both sides and I or emailing or whatever or texting and finding out, see if they can talk to you. And when you do that, you have to kind of build a report and show that you're trustworthy and also build up a portfolio to show that you're an accurate reporter and that you can that their secret's safe with them. A lot of times people feel appreciative when you do things like that. Okay. Um, Keeping police reports in perspective, if the only information about the arrest of George Floyd that ever came was released by the Minneapolis Police Department, a death would pass unnoticed. But then, what happened was a video came out, and then it showed that there was a lot more that went on. And that's another thing that's happened often too, is that there's always some tip. You always have to keep your eyes and ears open. You have to listen to people when they provide information to you, and you have to actually start calling and texting people. Those are the three things to really keep in mind when you deal with these sorts of issues, because there always could be something behind it. Okay. This, chapter of courts is very much the same thing. You hear a lot of things being said in courts, that sort of thing. But sometimes, like a lot of things that are seen being said in courts or something like that, there's always something behind it. I remember during the O.J. Simpson trial, there was a lot that was said during courts and that sort of thing that was, you could argue, was kind of manipulated, that sort of thing. But when, there's been a lot of reporting since then that have showed that maybe a lot of the things that were introduced into evidence back in that 1995 trial was like kind of skewed, or like the way the jury handled things was actually like, um, I mean, I don't care what side you're on, this sort of thing, but I remember like reading about how, and this wasn't reported back then, but and often these are the kind of things that come up in follow-ups. Once the story has been broken, sometimes it may not even come out for like 10, 20, 30 years. But there was an O.J. Simpson documentary about 10 years ago, and one of the things they noted that they really tried to go into some sort of influencing with the jury. And again, this is kind of something you deal with when you actually like you start talking to people within the realm of the story. Okay. All figures that are potentially involved. And one of the things they said was that they really tried to manipulate the jury into believing that O.J. Simpson was a very sympathetic to the black community when actually, in effect, he essentially wasn't. And what they did was the not the prosecute, I'm sorry, the defense attorneys for Simpson removed photos. This is in the documentary. I'm just quoting documentary. They removed photos that showed him with a lot of his white friends and replaced him with black friends. So, and this is when the juries toured and visited the house. So that was like a manipulation tactic. They did, and that actually the Simpsons attorneys will tell you to this day, this is what they did, and this is and they have no apologies for it. So, defense has to fight for their clients. So, um, all right. Anyway, it's kind of a drastic swing here, but anyway, then I mean, obviously, you deal with things like the environment. You find out like we find out about things like contaminated water, which seems like too late. We find out about things like, global warming and things like that, almost like too late. Like, why are we having all these storms? Why is it so hot, like so early in the year, as opposed to the way it used to be when you guys were little or something? Why is it that like the icebergs are melting or something? We have this weird weather where it gets really like apparently that has something to do with the fact that sometimes we have like really bad snow in the beginning of winter and really bad snow at the end of winter, but not in the middle. It's called the polar vortex. You know, there's like reasons for things that and why they happen. It's important to do things like actually like reach out to people like scientists and that sort of thing. Get the information that's not just released by Robert F. Kennedy Jr., speaking of public health, who's the Health and Human Services Secretary picked by Trump. He's known as a bit of a guy who's like really anti-vax and really kind of anti-everything, and just basically, believes in things like eating McDonald's is actually more healthier for you than actually eating string beans. I don't know. But anyway, he's a big red meat guy. Talks a lot about COVID and a lot of the stuff that came out about that. And how there was like a lot of misinformation that came out a lot about that. I mean, I know you could argue about the vaccines and that sort of thing, but Um, you know, I mean, you know, again, I remember LeBron James saying this basically is that, you have to kind of educate yourself and that sort of thing and really kind of find out from the sources whether things are really actually effective or not. Um, you know, my wife actually got some like news about using the vaccine that was actually kind of a little bit detrimental. I'm not saying it's a bad thing to use the vaccines or anything. I'm just saying. So there is a little bit of a middle, I wouldn't say a middle ground, but there's a little bit of fuzzy area as far as that's concerned, I would say. But the whole thing that like Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is like almost in the other extreme where he says that all vaccines are bad. So I don't know. And now we have a like growing number of measles cases and things like that. That's one way to look at like the things that are going on when government releases information to you and see like the impact and the effects of the things that they're doing. You look at like what are essentially the consequences, and that's when you look at things like data and stuff like that. So you look at the beginning, it's like the chicken and then it's like the chicken and the egg, right? Um, what started or what starts it really? Robert F. Kennedy Jr., the Health and Human Services Secretary, starts doing things that just basically, um, basically kind of like peeling back things that are basically kind of healthy for you or protecting people and things like that, like measles vaccine, stuff like that. And then you find out essentially, like you say, okay, well, one of the things you want to do is again the who, what, where, how, why, when. And one of the things you want to do is like what kind of an impact is this having on people? So you wanted to just take Robert F. Kennedy's word for it that this is sort of what his policies are working. You have to look at like essentially the subsequent impact of that. And measles cases are on spiraling upward, in ways that have never been seen. People are dying. Because of this. So no matter what stance you take on the vaccine, it's just something you can almost report as just something that's been happening. Okay. And that's actually really like kind of showing. And that's when I say like showing, not telling. You just don't report to people like vaccines are good. Okay. What you do is you kind of let people make up their own mind and make up their own decisions because any kind of evidence obtainable truth, closest obtainable version of the truth is that's how you get there is you provide like whatever evidence you can provide that's actually like scientific or data oriented or something like that. So you try to show, okay, well, so he's had this policy, and since he's had this policy, measles cases have spouted upward. So that's a lot different than saying vaccines are good, you know. Um, Sometimes vaccines also cannot work on people and then they can work against them. And you could actually maybe show some data in that regard. Some people just are not able to take vaccines. I want to show you and talk a bit about an example where a press release, well, in this case, a lot of times press releases are just not even press releases. They're actually just police reports. And that's how the police often just release information in their own kind of like Facebook way where they show like a paragraph or two. But sometimes when they talk to the reporter, all they do is hand them this. Now, this is an incident that goes back to 2020, and it's almost like the reporter has to play some sort of like decoding game in order to truly kind of understand what the hell it is that you know the police are talking about. Um, and This was especially I mean, these are the kind of things that are like, when they hand it off to a reporter or something like that, it almost like kind of begs suspicion that you need that because when they hand it to a reporter, instead of like really like trying hard to basically like, you know, make the or have the reporter basically kind of as I said, spin in a way that actually will have the reporter report things accurately and get the information that they need and that sort of thing. They make it a little harder. I'm not saying that's purposely done because sometimes these places aren't staffed enough to actually provide press release writing, that sort of thing. So they just have some person just say, "Here you go, here it is." Okay. Um, and what they did here in this particular case was there was a man who died. Um, he was shot and killed uh, while he was jogging, essentially. Not I mean not while he was actually jogging, but he was stopped. And his name was Ahmaud Arbery. Ahmaud Arbery. So it was in 2020. It was in December 20. It was in February 2020. And really, again, the whole lesson here again is like trying to go beyond like what's just told to you and like trying to peel beyond the surface, like the Megalomania release, and seeing like what really matters to people, what really cares, what people really care about, what are the sort of consequences that people should care about, especially when it deals with like things like police policy and how they deal with people. Okay. Um, Now, when you look at this report, you see the first thing you see is actually like again, it's really kind of like I think the word is obfuscate. It's really kind of like a way of actually kind of clouding like the information you're trying to get. And this is actually like what the police got when they first heard of this shooting incident. And it's interesting when they really kind of pay attention to who they list here as victim, and then who they list as suspect and witnesses. Okay. All right. So anyway, this is their megalomania release on this. Okay, this is how they got information, the reporters initially. And you can't blame the reporter for reporting it initially, like just the way it is, because this is what they got. Okay, you could blame them for like just basically regurgitating Donald Trump Truth Social posts and without getting this Iranian side on things, but in this particular case, you really only have the initially the police to deal with. I mean, you eventually and very quickly can do turn that around and go to the family and go to other people who might be eyewitnesses and things like that. But right now, this is all you really have to deal with. So you see Ahmaud Arbery is the victim. He's shot and killed. And then there's this Travis McMichael. And then there's interesting because this is a person who has the same last name. Now, this apparently is a father and son. Okay. The witness is the father, the Travis is the son. Okay. And then there's this William Bryan here who's also a witness. Okay. I think these are people who live on the street, but these are the people who actually really kind of pay attention to here because they were the ones who were directly on the scene and kind of involved. Okay. And who are mentioned in this narrative here, which again is not written in news story format. It's written in very kind of like zigzagging, well, a chronological order, which is not news, it's just not inverted pyramid. It doesn't list the most important thing first. That's your job is to kind of take it and find whatever the lead is, and which might not even be in this narrative right here, and put that at the top of the story and tell people what really happened. Okay. I mean, the first paragraph says, I responded to Steela Drive. This is in Florida, by the way. And Holmes Drive, in reference to shots fired. While I was there, there was a man who was bleeding out. I mean, doesn't he, and then he was advised the male on the ground was deceased. So you do have a report of a death right here, but you don't have a report of actually someone being shot, killed. So you have to kind of dig a little deeper. Upon my arrival, I observed Officer Minshew, I think it says, sitting at perimeter. I began speaking with Gregory McMichael. I remember him. Okay, he was the witness. Okay, there's two witnesses here, really, and one suspect. So this is the father, okay, who was a witness to the incident. McMichael stated there had been several break-ins in the neighborhood and further stated the suspect was caught on surveillance video. Now, it's interesting the word usage being here because the suspect is actually the victim. The victim, they're calling the person the suspect in the narrative here, but here he's being called the victim. So this is what I'm saying. Like you can't really like judge a book by its cover, can you? You have to kind of pay attention to these inconsistencies and things like that. I mean, it could have been an innocent mistake made by the police officer, and he's just really repeating what the guy said, but he's saying that the suspect was caught on surveillance video. The suspect turned out to be the victim, the person who was shot and killed. Okay. And by the way, he was black. Okay. McMichael stated that he was in his front yard and saw the suspect from the break-ins hauling ass down Satya Drive. It's interesting how this person who's just a witness also keep in mind, keep reporter radar in your head. Think of inconsistencies. Think about like this doesn't make sense. When something doesn't make sense or something like that, or when they rush to judgment, that's another thing to think about here. They're already saying that this person was involved in break-ins. How do they know that? Do they have any kind of evidence of that? Um, Travis, the guy running down the street, let's go. So they got in their freaking truck. And McMichael stated he went to his bedroom, actually got his 357 Magnum, which is a very powerful gun. And Travis grabbed his shotgun. So Travis, again, was the son. He didn't know the male was armed or not. Okay. Um, McMichael's started the other night. They saw the male, and because they said they saw this male, the same person. The person was jogging down the street, which is something I do. Okay. I mean, could it be the same exact person? That's another thing you have to ask yourself. How did they instantly know it's the same exact person? Um, he got in their truck. He drove to Tia Drive. They stated when they arrived at the intersection of Tia Drive and Holmes Drive, they saw the unidentified male. They started to drive down Burford, blah, blah, blah. They followed him. Michael said the unidentified male turned around and began running in the direction from which he came. And Roddy was the other witness, by the way. Excuse me, that's William Bryan. Okay. Um, Sorry, I kind of lost where I was. Roddy attempted to block him, which was unsuccessful. So there's a witness who attempted to block the person. Another inconsistency. Why was this person being called a witness and he was blocking the person? Okay. So McMichael then he said, Michael stated he then jumped into the bed of the truck and he and Travis continued Holmes Drive to intercept him. McMichael stated that they saw the unidentified male and shouted, "Stop, stop, we want to talk to you." They pulled up alongside the male and shouted to stop. Travis exited the vehicle with a shotgun. McMichael stated the unidentified male began to violently attack Travis. Hence the word, look at the word violently. Okay. And the the two men started fighting over the shotgun. Okay, well, somebody has a push shotgun point at me. I'm gonna fight. And fired a shot, and then a second later with a second shot. And then he died. He fell over and died. Okay. So that's all the people had. That's all the reporters had. Okay. So what happened was, I mean, and actually, it was, I'm not making fun of this paper or anything like that, but this particular paper in Florida reported the news, Brunswick News, they actually ended up doing a very good job in this story. But all they initially had, pretty much what was in the press release. Police are investigating the shooting death of a 25-year-old Brunswick man Sunday afternoon in Stia Drive Shores neighborhood. Coroner reports in the county coroner, Ahmaud Arbery died at the scene at 1:08 p.m. Really horrible. Glen Police spokesman Brandon Kondo said Monday morning that the shooting death is still very much an active investigation. At least he said that much. Police are declining to release further details at this time. According to the county police report, officer was called the report of shots fired on the ground. A short time later, I was advised the male is bleeding out. He was deceased. And that was it. That was it. For a good month or so, that was all people know. Now, what happens in this time period is, especially when there's something that's fishy. And I talked about before about this kind of the realm or the sphere of people within the story or the crime or whatever. There's always a lot of people within that sphere. So maybe the reporter might have, from my understanding, actually might have been talking to family, and the family might have been saying like what happened to Ahmaud Arbery was not exactly what was being reported. There's a lot more to this, and for a very long time, that sort of thing happened routinely. Okay, probably it still happens, but I mean, I'm just saying that it happened routinely. When I was a young reporter, I would see police reports that didn't really explain everything that happened, and then things would come out, but sometimes it was a lot harder to do that because you had to like take the family's word for it, that sort of thing. And there was no evidence to suggest otherwise, and then you'd have the other side would deny it. So it became a he said, she said thing. Um, so they got the tips, they probably heard things, but the one tip that apparently came in that's become a big thing over the last 10 or 15 years, okay, in particular. And actually, like you could almost date it back to the Rodney King video, which is actually was the big incident that where the man by the name of Rodney King was beaten in Los Angeles, and the police officers were tried, and after they were beat, he was nearly beaten to death. They were tried and they were found not guilty. Started riots in Los Angeles in 1992. It was a big deal. And some of the people who were on the O.J. Simpson jury, not coincidentally, actually said in the documentary that they quitted O.J. Simpson because they wanted to even things out for Rodney King. So, um, anyway, so that was one of the. But when people really started bringing in like the iPhone videos, the cell phone videos, those sort of things, which is what happened in the George Floyd case in 2020, that really changed a lot. It happened in the Ferguson case 10, 12 years ago. Um, on and on and on. And it really started almost like a revolution in that information. And now we got a better way to really get to the most obtainable version of the truth. And in this particular case, it was one video that didn't really reveal everything, but it came in on a tip where somebody, it's interesting. What happens is there's always within that sphere of people involved in a crime or whatever. A lot of times there's people who have like guilt, that sort of thing, where they feel like maybe they could have done more, or maybe they feel like they almost call it like a come to Jesus moment or something like that. They look at their family, they talk to their family, and they even get anxious about it, and they have like the riddle of self doubt. And it wouldn't I don't know exactly where this tape came from, this video came from, but it came. And what it did was it showed that there were more people that there was more than what meets the eye of what was going on here. That what really was really happening here that there wasn't exact okay, so maybe they did suspect that this was the robber and that sort of thing. But what they did was what this video helped show was that these people rushed to judgment and that there were more than one suspect involved. That in fact, two of the people identified as witnesses, the Roddy Bryan and also the father, Michael, were not just witnesses, but also should have been suspects because they essentially helped kind of do things that helped lead to Ahmaud Arbery's death. Okay. It all started with this simple video, and this was actually a video taken from Roddy Bryan's truck. Remember, he was the one who wasn't on the scene at first. Okay. He was the one that was driving to the scene. And all it said was that he said he was trying to blockade the guy. It was one thing that gave away the intent of Roddy Bryan. It shows that maybe he wasn't just there as like an eyewitness, that he was there to actually make trouble. And you actually hear it in a simple sound that comes within the video. Try to see if you can hear it or hear it, see if you can hear it yourself. It's a car. And you'll see Ahmaud Arbery running. This is something I do, by the way. I run down the street like this. By the way, you see somebody running down the street, do you instantly think that's going to be a bank robber? Or sorry, a burglar, burglar. Okay, so before the actual gunshots happened there, you can see he's running. It was almost like a moment. He was running down the street, and suddenly now he's actually tangled with a gun. So it wasn't like this whole kind of like, grand scheme, it sounded like, with people like uncovering like a burglar suspect or something like that. It was actually somebody actually almost basically being attacked on the road. Is what happened, what this video shows. But there was also a sound that was made that shows again that not just these two people were out to make trouble, but the guy driving a truck. And I'll play it again. See if you can think of what that sound is. It was right there. Did you hear the click? It's a gun. It was a gun. Okay. So it shows that this guy was actually not just out. The other guy said, "Yeah, we were out to like go after this guy, so we grabbed our guns, blah blah blah." And then we called Roddy, and he was going to help out or whatever. And the guy brought a gun too, so it showed that like he has some sort of what they call intent or motive to cause trouble. Okay, and when you also, like I said, when you also watch the video, it doesn't seem like some grab scheme to like go after a robber. It's actually just people like literally like attacking somebody in the street and shooting and killing them. And this truck comes in to help blockade him. Okay. What this video did, it didn't reveal everything, but what it did was it led to the police to really kind of restart the investigation, interview more people who knew armed robbery, knew what the motivations of these people were, knew what their backgrounds were, and really find out what their intent was. Okay. Um, there was also another police cam video that came out.
Make sure you got a video. Police did eventually arrest 2 suspects, but it was days after this video of the fatal shooting emerged. Gregory McMichael and his son Travis were charged with murder and aggravated assault. The case has reignited the national debate over racial violence.
I'm sure you saw the news about Ahmaud Arbery. It looks like murder.
The American public saw the video.
What exactly happened in the last moments of Mr. Arbery's life? Using security camera footage, cell phone video, and 911 calls and logs, The Times has reconstructed the critical 12 minutes from when Mr. Arbery appeared on Satilla Drive to his death less than 300 yards away. It's around 1 p.m. on February 23rd when Ahmaud Arbery is out, less than 2 miles from his home. A security camera at 219 Satilla Drive is recording when Mr. Arbery enters the frame at around 1:04 p.m. He may have been jogging in the area, but he stops on the front lawn of 220 Satilla, a house being built across the street. Arbery glances around and wanders into the open construction site. Inside, security footage briefly captures him looking around. Meanwhile, outside, a neighbour walks from Jones Road towards Satilla Drive and calls 911.
There's a guy in the house right now. The house under construction. 219 or 220 Satilla Drive.
The neighbour waits by the street corner. He will later tell the dispatcher that Arbery resembles a recent trespasser in the area.
Kind of an ongoing thing out here. Black guy like when he hurt.
On multiple occasions before February 23rd, several trespassers were caught on camera at 220 Satilla. The owner routinely alerted the police. On 4 occasions, what appears to be the same man was filmed. It's unclear if this was Arbery, but even if it were, this does not justify his shooting by neighbours outside on the street. The site's owner says nothing was ever stolen from the house during these incidents or on February 23rd, and no property was ever damaged. But neighbours were aware of the trespasses, and the community was on alert. Now, back to the day in question. It's 1:08 p.m. and Arbery is walking around inside the house. 4 minutes after he entered, he walks out and runs off.
He's running right now. There he goes right now.
What is he doing?
He's running down the street.
In the top corner of the security footage, we can see down the street to 230 Satilla, the home of Travis McMichael. At 1:10 p.m., Travis and his father, Gregory, grab their guns, jump in a white truck, and leave the house to pursue Mr. Arbery. We don't have footage showing
Also, vigilante justice.
in the next 3 minutes, but testimony Gregory McMichael gave police at the scene and interviews by another witness, Roddy Bryan, indicate what happened. Gregory and Travis McMichael follow Arbery onto Burford Road. Their neighbour, Roddy Bryan, sees the pursuit, gets in his car and follows. The McMichaels try to cut Arbery off. Arbery doubles back and passes them. Bryan tries to block Arbery, but Arbery runs past him and toward Holmes Road. Gregory McMichael climbs from the cab to the bed of the truck, armed with a handgun. We don't know exactly what happens next, but Bryan and the McMichaels end up following Arbery on Holmes Road, and we next see Arbery at 1:14 p.m. running back down Holmes Road, away from Roddy Bryan and towards the McMichaels. Roddy Bryan is filming, and a warning, these scenes are distressing. Gregory McMichael dials 911 at this time.
911 with your emergency.
I'm out here at Satilla Shores. There's a black male running down the street.
Satilla, where at Satilla Shores?
I don't know what street we're on. Damn it.
Sir, hello, sir.
Sorry, I had to see that.
Let's watch this back and break down what happens. This is Arbery. He has been running from the vehicles for almost 4 minutes. Travis is standing by the driver's side of the truck, armed with a shotgun. Gregory is in the bed of the truck on the 911 call. Arbery doesn't know where to run. He veers right, then left, and then darts around the right side of the vehicle. Arbery comes around the front of the truck. We see his white t-shirt through the windshield. And here is Travis, now leaning toward him. This is the instant the first shot is fired.
You can see there was a lot more involved there than that really just kind of goes into essentially the New York Times, actually, the New York Times reporting it. You can see that there's actually like a lot more involved there than just like, you know, somebody like chasing a potential burglar suspect. This actually shows like another part of the body cam. Actually, it was body cam on the police officer.
Contradict the account from one of the men charged in Ahmaud Arbery's killing. William Bryan, goes by Rhodey, recorded Gregory and Travis McMichael chasing Arbery back in February. Now, Bryan's lawyer says his client was, quote, never more than a witness to Arbery's death. But Omar Villafranca has the video that suggests he was more involved.
What, you're a passerby coming through?
Nah, not necessarily.
This body camera footage obtained by our Jacksonville station, WJAX, shows Roddy Bryan talking to police moments after Ahmaud Arbery's death. Bryan recorded that video of the February 23rd shooting. It was posted online months later, bringing national attention to the case and leading police to arrest him, as well as Gregory and Travis McMichael. Now, Bryan and the McMichaels face several charges in the killing, including felony murder. They have all pleaded not guilty and have been denied bail by a judge.
I truthfully need to be cleared of this because I had nothing to do with it.
Before his arrest, Bryan said his reputation was being smeared, but in the body cam footage, he told police this.
I pulled out of my driveway, was going to try to block him, but he was going all around it, and I made a few moves at him, you know, and he didn't stop.
We think he's an active participant.
I spoke to Cobb County Prosecutor Jesse Evans for 48 hours. He said there's evidence to suggest that Bryan hit Arbery with his truck while trying to box him in. This is how Bryan's attorney, Kevin Goff, responded.
He's never been more than a witness to this shooting.
Okay, well, anyway, that showed that like he wasn't really a witness. Let's just show you that basically it showed that he was like trying to box him in. He may have even hit him, and he had a gun, and he had bad intent. And what happened was this: they were all found guilty, and they're all in jail for murder. As you can see, Travis McMichael guilty beyond belief. Greg McMichael, malice murder, but still felony murder guilty. Rhodey Bryan, I'm sorry, I always mispronounce his name. Malice murder, felony murder, but felony murder guilty. So they'll be in jail for a very long time. But that all happened because of this one video. And again, it happened because the reporters, the people who were involved, the people who really wanted to seek the most obtainable version of the truth, didn't just stop at the press release or what the police report said. They wanted to find out more. And it's really almost like hard to not find out more, because you have people who will I'm sorry, my screen's a little fuzzy. You have people who will do whatever they can to basically, that will do everything they can to, what happened there? Sorry. Okay. All right. You have people who do whatever they can to like seek justice. There will be somebody within that sphere of the incident, as I said before, that will basically try to report on try to like whether they feel guilty or they want to get to the truth, or maybe like even somebody looking out a window and like wanting to like say basically that's not what I saw out there. Somebody will also, there's always somebody there who always wants to seek justice, and that's what you have to trust, I guess, as a reporter when you try to get to the most obtainable version of the truth. All right, so that's all I have to say, and you know, like I said, what you have to do, And also, you should also have all your rewrites back for the, good job on the rewrites for the, Leeds worksheet assignments. So you have the Megalomania assignment. Remember, like, if you still have time, you could check with me. If you don't know exactly what you think the lead is, you could email me, whatever. Don't forget to email Bill, even if you're not completely sure, to be honest with you, of what you think the story should be. Maybe just at least get something to him saying, like, what's going on? Bill's watching a lot of World Cups, so he's going to be a little busy. But, all right. Anybody needs any help, let me know. And then, actually, we're actually coming almost up to our last couple of assignments. So I'll be talking about that. Thanks very much, everybody. And let me know if you need anything.